I finally did it. Finally finished Dante's Divine Comedy. I don't know if I finished it or it's finished me. It's either of the two, but what a wonderful experience this is. As you can see, I have this very version of it, but to put into context, this is a new one. I bought it because I think I would have to read this again once I'm older. The actual version that I have for Hell or Inferno is this one, which was a difficult read. This particular translation was difficult to fully digest, but this version in particular isn't. So when I saw this one on sale, I decided to buy it so that at least the designs also would look similar. So that's the purpose of it. So it took me a long time, but I finally reached Paradiso, and my God, it was hell to get to heaven. And there's nothing quite like just being dumbfounded with the words that are in this particular novel or this particular story, because the Divine Comedy, in a sense, was written during a time where discourse, poetry, and philosophy is at an all-time high. They didn't have social media at that time, so they don't have anything to distract them other than the fact that they're all of these men just sit down in groups talking about thinking. And what I really love about this one in particular is that I was really picky on how I would like to read this. I wanted to read this at a specific place wherein I would be really at peace. That's why it took me a while to finish it. But it was worth all the kilometers. I literally went to Pampanga, which is 80 kilometers away from home, just to finish reading this one. So I was at the Sunken Church, which is really one of the most beautiful churches I've ever been to in my life. And when I was there, it really felt like something that is beyond words. And I managed to read like two or three chapters in there, but I decided to finish the rest of it in a coffee shop because there's no air inside the church. It was just really like a cave or something like that. It's really beautiful. And I really digested it for what it's worth. I was just sitting there at the back and just looking at my surroundings and trying to understand what's happening, what's going on. And now it may seem like, oh, this shouldn't be the topic of concern. Why am I sharing this particular thing when I shouldn't be talking about Paradiso in a sense? But for me, that's important and necessary because it's not necessarily copying what Dante did in this particular story, but somewhat having that experience yourself is something that's really important to fully understand it. I, for a fact, have mentioned with my struggles with hell or inferno and purgatorio with the number of characters that are being mentioned during that particular time that Dante was alive that were really prominent figures, and it's really difficult to digest because I am not someone who is gifted in history or someone who's interested in that particular side of the world, but just reading that and trying to understand the poetry that he's trying to imply about the characteristics, the evilness, the indecisiveness, and the beauty of these people, it was difficult at first. But then I realized why. Thanks to a particular poem or like a particular stanza in this one, I do not know exactly where it is, but it's a good thing about it too. It's for you to discover. There's a particular part in here where, in one of Dante's discussion with one of the angels or like the saints in one of the circles here or one of the spheres. That's what I'm trying to say. Is that there's a reason why we make use of these people as examples. Because what if the person that we used is unknown? Would it really make that much more of an impact? No, because you don't know this person. So how will that somewhat get your attention? Like that's why I struggle because I don't know these people. So why would I be somewhat able to relate to what these characters are feeling? That's why when they introduce the characters here of Augustine, of the other disciples or apostles, I was able to somewhat digest it better because those are people or those are characters that I've been really accustomed to, especially with my journey with faith for a while now. So you really get why these people are the examples. And I think that's one of the reasons why this particular story is controversial, because of how he painted these characters, no matter how true or how wrong he may be, with how they described the evilness, the indecisiveness, and at the same time, the purity and the visions of these people being good. So that may be looked at in different ways, but I think the sole purpose of that is to see through people and how they lived. And the beauty of this particular story is that when you read it, especially successively as much as possible, once you put down Inferno, no matter how difficult it is, you have to continue because you have to. I think to start with Inferno, with the journey that Dante took here, with Virgil as his guide, they just really literally just walk down and get somewhat spooked by these different characters, these different monsters, all these monstrosity, all of these things that would be scary to look at, the deformities that were described, all of these creatures that were there, somewhat guiding or blocking the passages, and just Virgil and Dante just going from one stage of hell to another in order for them to somewhat fully understand all of these scenes, true sins, and like a movie scene. Okay, I saved that one. Like all of these things that were happening, like all of them are actually ballistic. I really enjoy the. Maybe it's because I read like the old translation vibe. Again, I read the different book here. It was difficult to read this because I bought this when I was still in college, and now I'm. So imagine that it's almost 10 years since I last tried to read that, but it was all worth it because of how they describe all of these creatures and all of those sins and all the evilness that were there in hell, and how they had to descend. It's like descending into madness, like that kind of metaphor or like idea as to why that's the concept that they were taking in order for them to see like this embodiment of evil itself, like this big creature monster. And if you're reading things like that now, there's going to be a big fight or whatever, but there's no big fight. Instead, it's more about what Dante was able to make up through his words and his actions once he saw all of that from one sin to another. Like, and then being guided to Purgatorio, wherein he's basically like asking why are these souls here? What makes them not in hell? Why are they not in Paradiso? What makes it different? So I really enjoyed the idea of that gray line, wherein these particular souls, creatures, or characters weren't able to ascend, but at the same time they do not belong down there for reasons of their own. Like I think the idea of indecisiveness and at the same time trying to do good, but with the evilness in it too, is something that is not pure. So I think the importance here is the purity. That is something that Dante would have to learn the hard way because he had to continue journeying further. And when I finally reached the Paradiso part, and I haven't researched about this because I think that will make my understanding and interpretation of the stories different. So I'll just try to do that once I read it again as a series. But I like the idea that Virgil is someone that cannot go to Paradiso. Like he's limited to be a guide from Inferno to Purgatorio, as if trying to imply that he himself is not worthy to go to that particular part. And I love the idea that from descending into hell, you now have to try and climb the mountain in order to reach for the skies. So that's the idea where in Purgatorio they start like from the bottom of a mountain kind of idea, and then try to reach the peak of it all or the apex. And I look at Virgil as not just some guidance, but like a shadow of Dante. And I find that like poetic because as a mortal man, he managed to go from hell to purgatory, which is something that was questioned. Why is a mortal man here? Why is he still flesh and blood? That's why when he finally went to Paradiso, he had to abandon his mortality, or basically his physical being, and just travel as a soul with Beatrice. And I think at first it was like, huh, that's poetic already, but how will this transpire, or what are the things that he will see or accustom himself with? So it was difficult for me to finish this one, to be honest, because I was really longing to read this somewhere else. So it took me a while. So I had to read the pages back and forth a lot of times to make sure that I'm still reminded of the story. But what I really like is that I'm already in like my second or third month in masters, so I had managed to revisit a lot of things, especially with their course, which is history of mathematics. And the reason why I'm mentioning that too is because one of the things that we were studying are these key characters or key people or proponents in math and what they did for mathematics. And a lot of these people are philosophers, and how they viewed mathematics is not just about solving and calculations, but more with understanding the world. That's why there are quotations wherein mathematics is the language of the universe or the universal language and so on. And I love how mathematics became a prominent part of Dante's poetry. Like one of my favorite things here, it was like I even joked about it. Like you're trying to get yourselves out of the academics, but it's still following you. Like they made this like representation or metaphor that obtuse angles, you can only have one in a triangle. That's why you cannot force to have two obtuse angles in a triangle. That's impossible. That will break the idea of what a triangle is. So those understandings that are beyond things that we can hold on to. The idea that the undefined terms of geometry, which is the point, line, and the plane, are some of those things that are actually things that help define triangle, a line segment, a ray, all of those things. But with the usage of those as a piece of poetry, something that makes you think and makes you understand why mathematics and philosophy are hand in hand, especially during those days, with how he embodied that these things defy calculations. These things are immeasurable. I really love the end part too. Like they even mentioned the idea in geometry, like circle, circumference, radius, or whatever. But you don't have to be good in math to fully understand it. You don't have to be good in philosophy or history. The idea that it's just trying to imply is that all of these things are beyond our senses. One of my favorite chapters in here is when Dante is blinded, and then his sight was brought back afterwards. The idea that for him to truly see, he first needs to be blinded. Because I think you can look into that as if light does not exist without darkness. This is darkness does not exist without the light. And for you to fully see your vision, it is important first that you have to be blinded to see the importance of it, and at the same time to see where you're supposed to go. Because one of the key things in here is that one of the things that was questioned by Dante is why does this thing suddenly stop making sense? Like one of the key things in here is that there are quotations or like italicization of lyrics from praise songs, like the Hosanna, the Amens, all those things. Like he mentioned, like when he got to this particular spot, like, huh, where did the song go? Why did they stop singing? And then he was trying to look at Beatrice, who was afar, like he doesn't understand why it looks like this and that. And that's when he was told that it's because all those things are beyond our mortality, our senses, beyond our sight, beyond our grasp, beyond our taste, beyond our hearing, beyond our smell, all those things that make up our faith, all those things cannot be justified with words. It will never be enough. That's why I really enjoyed that part, especially when I got to read it. And then it just ended abruptly when he was finally judged, when he finally met God, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, and he was judged through love and all of those. I think the embodiment of love here is Beatrice, and I really love that it's a woman. And if, of course, we have a man and then a woman, but the idea of love is not in that particular manner, but seeing the beauty of life and being able to understand love to a woman. And Beatrice embodied that in a way that it's not really something that Dante is chasing, but through Beatrice, not particularly being a guy like Virgil, but more of like a model or like a visualization of all the good things that you look for or look forward in life. That's why when he's journeying, he always look for Beatrice. Like, where did she go? Like, whatever. And there's no lust. It's more of an admiration and inspiration to be able to finally find a spot. And the beauty of it all is that there's a spot for everyone. No matter the hierarchy, these people never did anything. They're good as to where they are. And that's the important key thing that was discussed in Paradiso. It's not about where you rank or why you're just there. It's about being content to being where you are. It's why you were cleansed in a way. At the same time, you are judged in a way of how you visualize yourself, how you look into yourself, and how you present yourself. And the beauty of this story is just ended without more poetries or poems about salvation. Because when he finally got to meet God and finally judged and welcomed to Paradiso, it is beyond his understanding. It is beyond words. There's no words or any poetry that will be ever be enough to write about that kind of experience or that kind of peace. And that's the same thing that I felt when I went to Pampanga to just go to that sunken church and try to somewhat pray and process what's going on. And it can be looked at in different ways. I know how controversial the Divine Comedy is, and you can take it for it as it is. And I think that's the beauty of art, and especially with literature, especially when it's limited to words. You don't have to follow what the scholars are saying. You don't have to follow what the academe is saying. You don't have to follow those things. You can just read it as an experience and make up your own, because at the end of the day, poetry, no matter how you intend to write it, no matter how you intend to say it, it will always land differently with different people. And for me, this was a journey from hell to purgatory and to heaven that's really eye opening. And I'm not saying that I'm cleansed and that I will be this goody two shoes, or no, I'm not gonna be that person, but I was able to somewhat understand that not everything can be written, not everything can be said, not everything can be described. Instead, some things are just meant to be lived, no matter if they believe or not. What matters is that you do. And it was difficult as a dummy to finish this, but it's worth reading. And I cannot wait to read this again, probably in the next 10 years, once I'm smarter or wiser. I think it will be a much different experience, especially with what life will entail for me. But so far, the vision is simple: to keep reading, keep living, and keep believing. So, yeah, go ahead, read this one. I highly suggest this particular edition, translated by Alan Mandelbaum. It's in English. It's really an easy read compared to the one that I bought first. I'm not bashing it because it's actually really noteworthy. Like, there are tons of notes in this particular edition, but it's really difficult to read. It's really difficult to read, and I really want to understand it better. So this is the edition that I read, and highly recommend it. Go ahead and read it. Because I finally finished it before it almost finished me. So it was a wonderful experience. Peace out.